There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Hello and welcome to Cancelled, a podcast that looks at the people and shows and movies and institutions that have been interrogated by the culture and that some people believe should be cancelled. I'm Claire Stevens and I'm joined by Jessie Stevens, and as Claire has been preparing for today's episode, I have watched her. She sits a few desks down from me and I've been sitting there doing my own prep, which involves TikTok. I'm like, tend to the vibe, get on TikTok, see what's happening. I look over to you, Claire. You are giggling all day, having a big old giggle. And so that's a good sign of today's cancelled subject. Anyway, today on the show, we are talking about the Twilight Saga.
That's Edward Cullen. He's totally gorgeous, obviously. But apparently nobody here is good enough for him.
We're kind of talking about the movies, but also the books, but mostly the first movie. Would I be right in that? Yeah, generally. So the 2008 film Twilight is based on the 2005 book of the same name by Stephanie Myers, and it starred Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson. It's gone on to become one of the most successful movie franchises of all time, which I don't think anyone expected when they were applying the special effects to Edward's sparkly skin in the first movie. I think they were like, this will be hilarious for 13-year-old girls.
Watching it thinking, Robert doesn't know how this will come out.
No.
And he's just being told what to do, as anyone would do in front of a camera, and he doesn't know this is going to be very funny for later.
A lot of people are looking back at Twilight and realising that it was actually absurdly problematic, mostly because of the entire plot. So we're going to do the Lord's work and revisit it. Jessie, first I'd like to ask, what part of the Twilight films do you think about a lot?
It's got to be Renesmee and the Broken Bat. It's got to be. I Googled it and I said, when Bella gives birth. It's about 3 minutes maybe. And she looks like she's dying. And apparently it was actually a doll. It wasn't actually like kind of Kristen Stewart, but then they had a doll that was like an emaciated, I don't know what you even call it, standing there. And it was the bit for me, specifically the 3 seconds where she drops her cup of blood that's in
that she's drinking.
And then you hear her back crack and she falls over and goes,
it's like The Exorcist. She bends over backwards and her back cracks and everyone's like, oh,
no. And it's like, why is Jacob here?
Why is Jacob here for the birth?
What was your favourite?
Mine
what's your standout
is
moment?
This quote.
Bella! Where the hell have you been, Loka?
Where the hell have you been, Loka?
What does Loka mean?
Well, I have two...
Where have you been well?
No, I'm saying well. I'm about to tell you. There are two problems I have with this.
Okay.
One, Taylor Lautner didn't commit to the line.
Did you know that Taylor Lautner is not a Native American?
Okay, that's more problematic than I thought it was.
Correct.
So the line comes across as inauthentic. And he says, Bella, where the hell have you been, Loka?
He hated the line.
He hated it. We know from a few little videos we've done, sometimes you're asked to say something and you say,
slogan.
It's not me.
And you've got to say, meat. It's great. And you're like, I'm not committing to that.
It's not me. I'm not committing.
No.
It's going to come out inauthentic. Taylor, it came out inauthentic. 2, when he says loca, it's the Spanish word for crazy.
Yes.
And so he's saying, Bella, where the hell have you been, crazy girl? And she is the most boring person in the world. And for him to call her loca,
you know, this is the equivalent that they always talk about of like, oh, Becky, happy birthday, you crazy girl. And it's always the most boring person that
who
it's like
one time
got too drunk and wet themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're so crazy, Beck. Look at you with your craziness.
No, she hasn't done anything.
Bland.
Like, she's not loca. Anyway, my structure for today. A recap of the first film in order to enter the vibe.
Yeah.
The problem with Bella Swan. The most ridiculous plot lines, feet Renesmee. And no, but Robert Pattinson hated it. Okay. Jessie, I need you throughout this courtroom. I'm going to need you to be Robert Pattinson. And you hate what you've done. You hate what you've created. You're angry about it. It's upsetting.
Even though that's the only thing, let's be honest, I'm known by.
Yeah.
I can't name another Robert Pattinson movie.
That's true. All right, recapping the first movie. The premise of the first film is simple. We all want to believe that if we move to another town, preferably a very small town, so where we've come from is exotic, Forks, everyone would think we were beautiful. And everyone, from a guy called Mike to a vampire to a werewolf to random people on the street, would be in love with us. And we'd just be the crazy girl. Loca. This is what happens to Bella Swan. For reasons that are never explained.
Do you know what the name Bella means in Italian?
Beautiful.
Her name is a beautiful swan.
Yeah, beautiful swan.
That is just the most bizarre. The whole thing just revolves around the fact that Bella is too beautiful.
Yeah.
To live in this world.
Bella Swan sounds like a name a Year 6 student came up with for their short story.
Yeah, 100%.
For reasons that are never explained, this entire film has a blue filter on it.
Yeah.
Bella moves from Phoenix, Arizona to Forks, a town where there are 3,100 people and proportionately a lot of them are either vampires or werewolves.
Almost all.
She brings with her a single cactus to show that she's from Arizona. On her first day of school, she's playing volleyball and she's really bad. She's scared of the ball, which is annoying. She then spikes the ball into a guy's head and he is nice to her and she makes friends with Jessica, played by Anna Kendrick, who in hindsight was far too good for this film, and the guy whose name is Mike. This is Bella in the cafeteria on that first day of school, and Jessie, I'm going to need you to describe what she is wearing.
Okay, I had this in my notes because I watched it last night too, and that's a pajama top. You know what she looks like? She's in Orange is the New Black.
Yeah,
she looks like she's in prison. She's got a long sleeve top, which is fine, but then an olive green pajama top, and every boy is tripping over his own feet, being like, beautiful swan, I love you, can you come to prom with me? And I'm like, Kristen Stewart, great. I don't buy it.
I don't buy it.
This unfriendly woman who barely speaks, who is incredibly awkward, I just don't think everyone's flocking to her.
That top to me looks like she works in like a convenience store. And that's her work
or
shirt.
Or like a Burger King.
There's a lot of wearing a top over a long sleeve shirt.
It was a vibe at the time. The whole thing is that she's too mature for everyone. She comes in and she's like, oh, this childish school in Forks.
School, I want to be a vampire. Okay, well, you're a loser. Bella spots the Cullens, mostly because they're walking around in a pack and they all have red eyes. And Jessica explains that A, they're foster kids, and B, they're together sexually.
The blonde girl, that's Rosalie, and the big dark-haired guy, Emmett, they're like a thing. I'm not even sure that's legal. Yes, they're not actually related. Yeah, but they live together. It's weird.
What kind of foster kids date each other?
I think they should all be more troubled by that. And I also think that in that first scene, if I went to Forks and I had no knowledge of anything, I would take one look at that family and go, they're vampires. It's very obvious. It's their skin, it's their eyes, it's their demeanour. They come across as vampires. Like, no question, no tension. No. They're the nerds. They're the musical ones and they're the vampires. Like, it's just completely obvious.
Obviously. Automatically, Bella starts biting her lip like she's horny and it's inappropriate at lunchtime. Bella goes to biology and she walks in. The fan is blowing her scent towards a student named Edward.
In the middle of winter, it is meant to be freezing. There is ice on the road and yet there is a fan in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Jessie, I want you to describe to me Edward's first reaction to Bella.
Okay, I love this so much. He's covering his nose and his mouth like when you get on the bus and the person next to you smells like feces. Like, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then she does in the movie, she does like a little sniff of the armpits, but he is so revolted by... I'd go home sick. No. If I was Bella, I'd go, something's gone terribly wrong. I did not wash.
Man.
Turns out I did wear my pyjama shirt to school. It smells like sleep and BO, and I'll be going home because he's very upset.
He's disgusted by her. He then continues to just stare at her throughout the class, and she keeps shaking. Then she catches him in the office afterwards asking if he can move to another class.
And her pyjama top stinks.
After that, Edward has several days off school, which I guess is fine because he's been going for over 100 years.
But the best part is when he gets back, she's like, where have you been or whatever? And he's like, I was out of town. Can you imagine being in year 10 and a kid just disappears? It's like you're at school, so you can't just go out of town.
Just be out of town.
Like, where did you go and how did you get there and how did you get permission? Just be out of town. Were you on a work trip, sir?
You're not a grown man.
No, where do you have to be?
He finally returns and in class he asks Bella if she likes the rain. And she says, I don't really like the rain. Any cold, wet thing, I don't really.
And he's like,
and that's rude.
That's my dick.
He's cold.
That's my dick.
Oh, my dick is cold and wet. Literally 21 minutes into the movie, a car flings into the school car park and almost kills Bella. And Edward grabs her and stops the car with one hand.
And no one asks about the handprint.
I need you to know that Bella, a 16-year-old who just moved here, would have been killed at school in her first week of being there had Edward not saved her. Despite the fact she literally was not touched by anything, she does not have her hair out of place, she goes to hospital. The first of 2 visits in this film. And Edward gaslights her and tells her she hit her head and is confused, and that's why she thinks he was on the other end of the car park.
He keeps pursuing her, like I think it's even in the hospital or whatever, and he's like, we can't be friends. And it's like, okay, then leave her alone.
Leave her to die.
Leave her to die and stop saving her life because it's confusing messaging.
It's like Final Destination. She needed to die and now you've interfered with fate, so she's going to try and die a million more times. It's at this point we learn that Edward comes into her room and watches her sleep at night. He also eavesdrops on her conversations with other people and then asks her details from those conversations. They go on a field trip to a literal greenhouse, and just while they're walking, she trips and he's like, watch where you're going. And why is she so clumsy?
I have a theory about this that I will bring up in the next segment about her clumsiness.
Edward says they can't be friends, and if you were smart, you'd stay away from me. And okay, don't call her dumb. Because she's done nothing except almost die.
This is every guy to me between the ages of 15 and 25 who is like, if you're smart, you stay away from me. I can't give you what you want. And it's like, this is just telling every girl, like, he's just a vampire. Like, he's just...
All our relationships were cringeworthy in teenagehood and young adulthood because of this movie.
Yeah, because it was always like, it's not that he doesn't want me.
It's that he's scared he'll kill me.
Then it's like, it's that he's a vampire or alternatively a werewolf.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
We learn that the Cullens stop going to school when the weather is nice, and Jesus Christ, they also stop attending when the wind blows the wrong way. So I just feel like there's some attendance issues that need to be addressed.
The Cullen family who are also clearly in their 30s.
After a vague conversation with Jacob, Bella is somewhat suspicious that something vampire-y is going on with Edward, so she goes into town and buys a book. But it's nighttime, and that means there are scary men.
First, she Googles it. And the thing that she Googles is the cold people or something. I just don't think vampires would be the first thing to come up. And then she goes like through an ancient Egypt thing. She's on a real Google rabbit hole. But then she purchases a book and I'm like, just stay on Google.
Oh, but it's nighttime and that means there are scary men loitering and stalking and they surround her. So bam, Edward shows up in his car.
Which is 2 near-death experiences in 24 to 48 hours.
Because he has also been stalking her. So just to clarify, the only way he saves her from the people who have been following her is that he too has been following her.
Correct.
Why is he driving like a maniac? You know how Edward can't read Bella's mind and they're sitting in the restaurant and he's like, I can read everyone else's mind. Maybe it's because nothing is happening in there. Maybe it's because she's just like, you know, Homer Simpson? With the thing in his like nothing be happening.
And it's like the monkey with the symbols.
Yeah.
Except at one stage she asks if he is Spider-Man. I'm thinking it has something to do with kryptonite or like spider venom. If I was on a date with someone and they genuinely asked if I could read minds or if I was Spider-Man, I would cut the date short.
I go, this is getting silly. This is silly. Edward has now admitted to Bella that he is a vampire and shown her that his skin glistens in the sun in some of the worst CGI effects I have personally ever seen. He says, I've killed people before. She says it doesn't matter. He said, I wanted to kill you. And I've never...
It should matter.
It should matter.
We met a week ago and he's looking you in the eye saying, I've killed people before. And I'm thinking of murdering you. And
I've never wanted a human's blood so much in my whole life.
I just think, red flag.
I know.
I didn't want to say it.
It's a red flag. He keeps telling Bella he doesn't know if he can control himself and it's like a lion fell in love with a lamb. That's a direct quote from the book and people have that tattooed on them. the baseball game.
Calm as you see him, Bella.
Okay.
It's during a storm, and I can hear the music in my head. It's iconic. I was smiling. It's vampire baseball. It's so embarrassing for everybody. Then 3 vampires arrive, and one realizes Bella is human, so they have to abandon Bella's entire life and leave. Like, why was she even there? She wasn't even playing baseball. No. She was just watching.
Which is impossible to umpire given the speed. Given the speed of what's happening, it's impossible to make a call.
And then Edward's like, Bella, you are my life now, but they just met. Then she goes back to Phoenix, and the vampire is like, meet me at your old ballet studio to save your mum, but her mum isn't there. It's a trick.
What do I need to talk about with the end of the film? Does she or does she not break her leg?
Yeah.
She breaks her leg. I have some thoughts.
Bella...
She breaks her femur.
Does get... Oh, no, I thought it was her tibia. I thought it was her shin.
No. So she breaks her leg, which I found extremely triggering. But she breaks her femur. It pierces the artery in her leg. That's why she's bleeding out, right? So then she goes to hospital. They're all, vampire venom. I'm like, no, bitch nearly died. Like, that is a critical artery that she was bleeding out of. When you break your femur, you need emergency surgery with pins and screws and a metal pole, which is a surgery I got recently. 24 hours later, Bella is moon boot, walking freely at prom. And I'm like, no, bitch is on crutches.
Why?
For 6 months.
Why do her parents believe she fell down a set of stairs and crashed through a window? And they're like, that's consistent with her personality.
Okay, if you fell down a set of stairs and broke your femur, you need to get your bone density checked immediately. Because you shouldn't be breaking bones like that. Very serious bone to break. And they're all fussing about her vampire venom. And I'm like, she is bleeding out. This is life-threatening.
What do you think of her acting in this scene? I just have a nice little image for you. What do you think it looks like?
Okay, we did discuss this, that every time Bella's in pain, she's also having an orgasm.
She's like,
so every time she's like, oh.
She's laying there like,
and that's what she does with her leg, and I'm like, that's just not.
When I'm in pain,
I'm not
having an orgasm.
I'm not moaning.
It's super sexual. That takes us to section 2, the problem with Bella Swan. I feel slightly anti-feminist focusing on Bella and the problem with her character because Edward is a toxic boyfriend. Jasper served in the Confederate Army, which isn't interrogated.
Which was like a detail none of us ever needed.
Carlisle is the flakiest doctor who just picks up and leaves at any minor inconvenience. And Jacob kisses Bella against her will and is a predator to her baby, but fucking Bella fucking Swan. The woman has no ambition other than being a vampire. She has no hobbies or interests. We're shown montages of she and Edward talking, but what could they possibly be talking about in that she has no personality?
All right, I have some things I need to say about this. Have you ever heard of a Mary Sue?
No.
Okay, I was listening to this podcast exclusively about Twilight, and it was talking about a Mary Sue, which is a type of fictional character, usually a young woman, although it happens with men too, who is basically seen as an author's idealised self-insertion. Right?
Okay.
So imagine that you're writing a book. This is what I did with every book I wrote when I was a kid, right? So it's like you have all these characters and then you have this really hot, really smart, really funny character that comes in and doesn't do anything wrong. And your story inevitably loses steam because there's no plot because you're like...
And you don't want to hurt them.
No, because you're like, she's perfect and beautiful. So they say that Bella Swan is the ultimate Mary Sue. Yeah. I'm going to read out some of the things that make a Mary Sue and you have to tell me whether...
Okay, Bella's
they apply. She has no flaws to speak of.
Oh, she's pretty clumsy.
Okay, it says explicitly in this, clumsiness is not a flaw. Okay, and neither is reading too much. She's drop dead gorgeous. Claire, the microphone can't hear your nod. Do you think that's a quality?
Okay, this is my issue with Bella Swan. She is no more attractive than any other woman at the school.
No, but
for some
the thing
reason...
is, and this is the thing about what the author does, is they insert this person that thinks that they're quite ordinary, but everyone everywhere is unanimously, overwhelmingly attracted
There's
to her.
no one that isn't in love with her.
She sometimes has a tragic backstory, which is the divorce and the...
Oh, yeah.
And the Bechdel test. Claire, can you cite one conversation that Bella has in any of the movies or the books that is not about Edward?
Yes.
With a woman. Sorry, with a woman.
She speaks to Anna Kendrick and Angela...
About
their prom dresses. And it's not...
But they're talking about their prom dresses to go to...
Yeah, but it's not specifically about men. And then she says, I'm going to the bookshop. I do have in my notes, Bella is a shit friend.
Oh, she's a
And
shit friend.
Jessica and Angela befriend her despite her lack of personality, stink face, and general rudeness. And she just ditches them as soon as Edward shows any interest in her.
Yeah, she no longer speaks to them and they act happy for her.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be.
She also has no resilience. So when Edward dumps her at the beginning of the second movie, she literally sits in a chair as the seasons pass. Then she starts seeing visions of Edward when she's in danger, so continues to put herself in danger, literally in order to see a not real version of the guy who dumped her.
I remember seeing that film at the movies after being dumped, and I remember sitting there with like a single tear down my cheek like, that's me. Bella's me, sitting in my chair watching the seasons change.
I have to say there was something very relatable about that scene. I'm like, I've been there. I've watched a year pass from my bedroom. But in the book, Stephanie Meyer does Pulitzer Prize-winning writing because it's just blank pages with the months to show time passing.
Classic, like an editor telling you need 300 pages.
Yeah.
And going,
And
well,
her going, I've
200
only-
of them are just months.
Jessie, as Robert,
Yep.
I mean, how do you feel about Bella?
I think she makes a terrible character. I think it's very hard for my character, Edward, to fully love her as we've never had a conversation.
Okay.
And we don't know who each other are. I'm meant to be just physically attracted to her and very protective, but in a murdery perpetrator kind of way,
Okay.
which
That
is
is
difficult to
hard.
relate with and
That's
dangerous.
I understand that, Robert, and I can see why you hated this film, all these films, so passionately. Moving on to the most ridiculous plot lines, Feet Renesmee. Bella's pregnancy and birth. We touched on this slightly, but it's Edward and Bella's honeymoon. They have sex a couple of times and Bella gets pregnant. How? Unclear.
There is a Twilight fangirl in the office and I asked her and she told me how.
How?
And apparently it is clarified in the books. And she was very defensive about this.
Yes.
She said, so when a man and a woman dies, and this is a fact, women's eggs die with them, whereas men's spermies live on. And that's why dead Edward is still
still have
going around
babies.
planting seed.
All right. Not bad logic. I will say, however, that the sex is problematic because Edward can't control himself, so Bella has bruises all over her and the bed is broken and he's bitten into a pillow.
And he's 107?
108.
He's 108 and she's 17?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So it's super predatory. Then Bella has chicken for breakfast, which in itself is an issue. And she gets sick, but it's actually because she's pregnant. But it's a sped up pregnancy for reasons that are also unexplained. Turns out the pregnancy is killing her because the child is half human, half vampire, and I believe it's drinking her blood.
That makes sense, actually.
She has to drink blood throughout her pregnancy, and she looks like shit. She looks horrible. It's all accelerated.
Yeah.
Honestly, because the plot had nowhere to go. They're like, she's pregnant, but we ain't got 9 months worth of content here. Anyway, then she suddenly goes into labour and her spine breaks. Rosalie, who has always hated Bella, decides she cares about the unborn child, not about Bella. So she's like saving the unborn child's life, which all sorts of messages. But she does a C-section, but then she gets horny for the blood, so she has to be removed. But she does a C-section and the morphine hasn't even spread to the stomach, which how did they have morphine? But Edward has to bite through Bella's placenta, maybe. It's incredibly
As
unclear.
Robert has come out on the record and said that does not make sense. He interviewed doctors. Would it make sense for my character Edward to bite through the placenta to get to the baby? Unnecessary.
No.
Unnecessary.
You had a scalpel in your hand. Despite having broken her back and having a C-section performed by her sister-in-law and finished off by a vampire, Bella is still alive. But then she dies, so Edward turns her into a vampire.
How does he do that?
The biting, the venom.
Yeah, but hadn't she already died? Don't you have to do it as they're dying?
It's like as they're dying. Okay, I think way too often about the name Renesmee. And I remember reading, for whatever reason, I was reading the books at that stage, and I read that and I laughed. And I remember it's explained she didn't want to upset her mother or her mother-in-law by naming the baby after either of them so she combined them. But the plot hole is this. You don't have to name your baby after
your mother or your partner's
She
mother.
made a real rod for her own back because nothing could work with Renee and Esme.
You know Esme's middle name?
What? Well, no.
It's not too bad, but it annoys me because it should have been the first name. It's Carly. And it's a mixture between Carlisle and Charlie.
Should have called her
Carly. Renee Esme.
Yeah,
Cullen.
for example.
Jessie, I don't understand why she's a CGI baby and not a real baby. Look at this picture. Tell me what you see just here.
So upsetting. Apparently it's the face of a teenager projected onto a baby, and that's like fundamentally really upsetting for humans to see it.
Why didn't they just get an actual baby?
I don't know. I think it's because the baby's meant to be growing too fast. It's got too much eyebrows and its eyes are too expressive.
I hate it. It looks like a picture. Okay, imprinting. It's an involuntary thing that the werewolves do where they find their soulmate.
Imprinting on someone is like when you see her, everything changes. All of a sudden, it's not gravity holding you to the planet. It's her.
And Jacob imprints on Renesmee and he's like, it's not my fault. I didn't mean it.
Why didn't he imprint on Bella?
I think he forgot.
Because he seems to like Bella.
He does seem to like Bella, but I think there's a thing where he's like, it was always meant to be Renesmee. Like the reason I'm in love with you is because I was really in love with one of your eggs that were going to be fertilized. And I was
Can you
meant
imagine
to
a family
love,
friend saying that?
I was meant to love this 6-month-old.
Okay, so we've got pedophilia, we've got necrophilia in that what we have is Bella sleeping with a dead man.
Yeah.
For
And then a man
books,
falling
and
in
then
love with her
child.
baby.
And by this point, no one's batting an eyelid. Because we've
No.
had a 108-year-old man sleeping with a 17-year-old.
Bella gets upset. She says this.
You imprinted on my daughter?
It wasn't my choice.
She's a baby!
It's not like that.
Oh, so she is quite outraged. Yeah.
Then Jacob refers to her as Nessie. And Bella says,
Nessie? You nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster?
the deal with Renesmee is that she'll age until she gets to maturity, so like 17. That's only going to take 7 years. So she's going to be 7.
Okay.
Because she grows fast or some shit. So when she's 7, Jacob will love her in a romantic
That's
sexual
still not
way.
old enough.
No, it's not. But Edward is 108 and Bella's 17. So
What is age?
what is age anyway?
I hate it.
I hate Renesmee. I have one more thing to show you about Renesmee.
Okay, all right.
These are 2 tweets I'd like you to look at.
Okay, all right. If I had written Twilight, I simply would not have made the adult werewolf fall in love with a newborn baby.
Yeah.
That has 500,000 likes.
Yeah.
I like that.
Therapist.
Twilight fake baby is not real and can't hurt you. And then it says Twilight fake baby. And it has pictures of what can only be described as an adult baby face with long hair.
They ruined that actress. Okay, final point. Robert Pattinson fucking hated it. He ran out of the premiere because he couldn't handle it.
Okay, I have a theory about what moment do you think Robert Pattinson ran out?
The thing is, I'm assuming it was the first film.
Yeah, it was.
I am thinking maybe it's when he sparkled.
Okay, I think it was just before that. It was when he walks up behind Bella and Bella goes, "How old are you?" And he goes 17. And then she says, "How long have you been 17?" I think that's when he ran out.
All right.
And he just
How
went,
about when he says,
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
do you think that might have been the spider monkey
Yeah.
that sent him over the edge?
maybe. He's quoted as saying, there's a lot of stuff, and by the way, in the interviews where he says these lines, because I had to see it in context, I was like, how is he shitting on this?
Yeah.
In a funny way, in a serious way. He is laughing while he says the following line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in the Twilight world that doesn't make any sense. It's like, why are they still going to high school? Like, up until last year, they're 100 years old.
Can you imagine, like, being with somebody in class and then finding out they're 108?
Like, you don't have to go to school. Just go and watch Netflix at home.
It's
If you can't age, that's fine, but you don't have to go back to school.
It's really strange. Speaking to E about the books when the first movie came out, he said, when I read it, I was convinced Stephanie was convinced she was Bella, and it was like it was a book that wasn't supposed to be published.
Yeah.
It was like reading her sexual fantasy.
I think it was. And apparently Stephanie Meyer was like, Robert Pattinson, he's Edward.
So it would have been really upsetting for
he probably
Robert,
felt.
I think he really didn't like it.
He was being interviewed by Osher around the time of Breaking Dawn Part 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And he says the most embarrassing scene to film was when they find out Bella's having a baby and they Google vampire baby.
I love how he's got 108 years of experience and he doesn't have a single book on his bookshelf.
What happens when we have a baby? In all the interviews for Breaking Dawn, all he does is poke fun at Taylor Lautner for falling in love with a baby. And you can tell that Kristen Stewart is like, can you not? I have to be all surly and like, ugh. Jessie, time for charges and sentences.
Okay, you go first with your charges.
All right. This is actually really important because I find this really upsetting.
Okay.
My charge, Renesmee.
Oh, no, that's my charge too.
As a name, as a character, all of it. I want it on the record. That little girl's name is Mackenzie Foy. She didn't go on to have a great career. She was in Interstellar around the same time. That ruined her. And I think she may have gone on to do great things.
Was it not for the Renesmee incident? Yeah.
But instead, she turned up to auditions and people said, what have you been in? She said, I'm Renesmee. And they said, oh.
You're upsetting.
And so they've ruined the poor girl's career.
I agree.
That was the height of her career. There's no coming back. And I'm going to need them to redeem her. I want a new movie with Renesmee where she's like, what was that?
About what? About her mum and dad?
All of it. So she's a normal teenage girl.
Yeah.
And she's like, my parents are severely unwell.
And dysfunctional.
In how they see the world.
Yeah.
They think they're vampires.
Yeah.
They think I'm a vampire.
Which is why they let Uncle Jacob imprint himself on me at 7.
It has been horrible for me.
And
this is my coming of age story.
And I'm not Renesmee Cullen. I've changed that too because I don't want anything to do with them.
No.
A bunch of incesty vampires.
Yeah, so I think that we need her redemption story.
Yeah.
And starring that actress.
My charge was also that Stephanie Meyer, when she came up with Renesmee, she should have gone, that's a terrible idea, and moved on with that day, and she didn't.
Yeah.
It became a feature of popular culture.
It needed to be the first idea of many. It needed to be a brainstorm rather than an idea that ended.
No one needed to see that draft.
No.
And the thing is that if Bella Swan had any friends, maybe she'd name the baby after a friend named Sarah, but she didn't. The only other women were Renee and Esme, hence Renesmee.
Bella's a victim too, but it's too late for Bella. She's a vampire. And Renesmee needs some help.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe Renesmee needs some help is the next 3 books. And the first one is called like Emancipation from Mum and Dad. And the second one is called Taking Uncle Jacob Through Court. And the third one is called My Grandfather. What's the doctor? Carlisle. My grandfather Carlisle. Okay, that's all.
I want those stories.
I was also going to charge you with a charge because of the terrible use of scope in this episode. It was so unclear whether we were talking about the book, the movies, the first movie, all the movies. It was very confusing for listeners.
As a
concept.
Yeah.
We have not been comprehensive except about the first film, which is all we had time to watch. So thank you for being here for this extremely chaotic episode of Cancelled.
We'll put everything on our Instagram.
I've been saving TikToks just to put on our Instagram.
At the twins_thoughts. There will be so many photos of Renesmee. There will be all the TikToks, all the videos, all the cringeworthy scenes, the laugh.
It's so fun.
Bella, how you doing, Loca? That's going to be, that might make it to the grid.
And please share with us your charges and sentences. Send them to the Twins Thoughts on Instagram and we will share them. We couldn't get past Renesmee, but I'm sure there's more there. This podcast is produced by Rose Kerr and the head of podcast at Mamamia is Eliza Ratliff. We will chat to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Chelsea and I co-host The Spill. Conversations with Friends is the show that everyone's talking about right now, but there's one character that's gotten under people's skin.
I cannot stand this person. She's the most irritating person. If I were friends with this person, I would lose my mind. I'd be like, just say what's in your mind. Just say it.
Find out which character has gotten people so fired up on the Spill podcast. Find it right here in your favourite podcast app.
This podcast was made by Mamamia, the only women's media company in Australia. If you want to support women's media, we'd love it if you became a Mamamia subscriber. There's a link in the show notes.